Welcome to the second episode of The Chartered Show. Thank you very much for sending us feedback, and I'm so pleased that you're enjoying the show. Today I've got two new guests on the show. My first guest is Maryanne Leicher, retirement specialist at Chartered Wealth Solutions, and she's going to be discussing the increase in the inflation rate and the increase in the interest rate, and how does this impact your life and how does this affect your investments. I'm then going to be joined by Glen Baker, and he's going to be discussing Ukraine, the markets, and the new share portfolio offering that we have at Chartered Wealth Solutions. And then at the end, I'm going to be chatting to you about decluttering. So welcome to the Chartered Show. Let's get started. Maryanne, I'd like to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you, Kim. It's lovely to be here.
So Maryanne is a retirement specialist at Chartered Wealth Solutions, and I've asked her to join us today on two topics that I'm hearing clients ask a lot of questions about. And that is, we just have to go to the shops and everything is getting way more expensive. So we know inflation is going up. And at the same time, we're getting all the reports about the interest rate going up. So with this inflation rate, interest rate, on the back of all of our minds, I thought it would be a great conversation for you and I to have. So Maryanne, welcome to chat to me about interest rates and inflation rates. I know two quite different topics, but I thought that they combine nicely together.
Well, thanks, Kim. And I think it is really relevant. As you said, it's difficult to scroll through social media at the moment and not be bombarded with
dinner party
noise.
Conversation.
Exactly. So I think for the most part it comes down to basic economics, supply and demand. So when something, be it cash, be it barrels of oil, is in excess supply, the price of that excess supply is generally low. And that's what we've been seeing the last couple of years. What does that mean, for the consumer? Well, very much, if your interest rates are low, your debt generally is low, and you have potentially more income at the end of the month to spend. And over time, that actually increases consumer spending and it increases inflation. The converse is also true. So when supply is under threat, demand potentially will exceed supply, the price of that supply goes up. And that's what we've been seeing particularly this year. It's been on the cards for quite a while.
I suppose with Ukraine, that's increased it. We've had the
Exactly.
COVID, unemployment, all of that,
Exactly.
all having an impact.
Exactly. So down to the basic economics, I think if we understand that, we have a better understanding of why certain things are going up. Definitely, you mentioned Ukraine, so the trouble and the invasion of Ukraine and the trouble that Russia is causing has thrown a spanner in the works. And there is a real threat for supply concerns, obviously around the world and very much here in South Africa, on fuel. So if your oil price goes up because supply is under strain, your fuel price is going to go up. And as you mentioned, you go to the shops, your food prices go up.
Fill up your car with fuel.
Exactly.
It's definitely gone up.
So very much there's an inverse relationship between inflation and interest rates. So a popular way of curbing rising inflation goes hand in hand with raising interest rates. Again, what does it mean? If you have debt, hopefully most of our retirement clients haven't got debt anymore, but that debt becomes
But they've got children
more
that have
expensive.
got debt.
Exactly. So it's very topical at the moment, but it's good to be aware and understand what's going on and not to let that fear take over and that panic.
Because I think that's a lot of times what's happening. I think it's all this bad news. I mean, when we have a lot of bad news bombarding us, and then on top of it, we're kind of looking at the money we've got for the month, and it's not going as far.
Yes.
So it does make for us to have that negative feeling. But maybe what I could ask you is, what can we do about it? Let's just talk about from our day-to-day spending. I mean, what can we do about the fact that inflation is going up, so things are more expensive?
So I think it's important, Kim, when what you've asked me is what can we do about it, and it's important to focus on what is in your control. And I think
good, that's a brilliant point, because too many times we're becoming overwhelmed and anxious, And when we look at it, we become overwhelmed and anxious about things that are completely out of our control.
Macroeconomics,
Yes.
one, exactly. So I think what we can do, as I say, is focus what's within your control, which I know we don't like to use the term, I'll use the term spending plan, not budget.
Not budget.
But re-look at your budget. It's, you know, in tough, volatile times such as these, it's important to just see where you could cut back a little bit. Yes, fuel, it's a big concern. You know, hopefully we're going to get some relief from National Treasury in terms of our fuel price and the makeup of it, albeit temporary. But maybe spend your fuel a little bit more wisely. You know, in retirement, I know a lot of my clients say, you know, they don't really go anywhere too often locally. You know, just be wise on your fuel spend. If you're going to go somewhere and you don't have to go in peak hour traffic, perhaps, you know, plan your day like that.
That's great advice, because what you're not saying is don't go live life.
Exactly.
Because I think what happens with all of this overwhelm, we go, okay, things have got so expensive, we're going to stay home. And we haven't got to this point in our lives where that's what we want for our clients. I mean, we really want our clients to be having experiences. So I suppose what you're saying is cut back on things that don't matter a lot to you,
Yes.
so that you've still got that extra money to do the things that do matter to you.
Exactly, and just be wise about it. Everything's about balance, I believe, in life, and you know, extremities is not the way to live. So definitely still live your life, but just be a little bit more cautious and a bit wary. I think what you can also do that's probably in your control is come to us, and this is a good test of trust in us as your retirement specialists, to lean on us. We are your sounding board in times like these. We take emotion out of the equation, and that's the value that we add to your life. So very much trust in us and trust in our fund managers, be it Morningstar, Portfolio Metrics. Very much they are positioning your investments and your portfolios. They're exposed to volatility at the moment, but they're positioning them to take advantage of any opportunities in the market. Where interest rates are rising, there's a lot of value in certain assets.
So yes, there's one thing, as you're saying, that we could look at, that we can control, and that's actually our spending. But as well, it's staying the course of our investments. It's not coming in and out of our investments because we're now getting emotional about what's going on. Am I hearing you correctly?
Correct, exactly. I think as South Africans, we don't give ourselves enough credit. I think we are extremely resilient and extremely agile from what we've come through. I mean, the last 2 years, it's been a marathon, but we've made it. And, you know, I think here's where we've got to trust the process and trust that time in the market is better than time in the market. It's that old saying.
Yes, exactly.
And very much, you know, we are positioning portfolios with our fund managers. We're keeping an eye on them to take advantage of rising interest rates.
So the opportunities that are available, because they are, I mean, we just have to look at interest rates going up. I mean,
Yes.
if you had a money market account, your
Correct.
interest rates going up. So that is, plus the investments, there are these opportunities that are happening. So as a client, we might not be doing it ourselves,
Yes.
but definitely it is happening behind the scenes, that all of these things are being taken into account.
100%, Kim. I mean, you know, a lot of people like 2 years ago, similar volatility in the markets, different players and different factors, but would want to take all their money out of shares, where not all shares are now unattractive. I mean, the JSE's held up really well. We've got resources that are flying
Extremely well, yeah.
And I mean, just thinking of the banks, the big banks in the financial sector, they really benefit from high interest rates. I mean, that's their main source of revenue. So there's pockets of value, and our discretionary fund managers obviously position portfolios to take advantage of that.
So it's definitely not all bad news. And this is the problem when we reading different news reports, when we're following articles online, bad news sells. So we're reading so much of it, so we get into that mindset. Yeah. And I think what I've also heard today is, if you are going through it, I mean, what I've heard you say is, one thing is come in and relook your spending plan, because there just might be that area. I know for me, when I did look at my spending plan again, I mean, I was paying Netflix and I was paying DSTV when I never actually used my DSTV. Yeah. So it was a saving straight away. So and those little things all add up through the year.
Definitely.
So that would be the one. And then the other one that I heard you say is, actually come in and have the conversation with your retirement specialist, because so many times we're thinking, I mean, about your investments, we're thinking that stuff's not happening. But actually every day, or people are looking, our portfolio managers are looking at it and making those kind of decisions so that we can be living our life without having to worry about it.
Exactly. This is where they work the hardest, actually, in times such as these. But very much, I think the conversation with your retirement specialist is so important, because it's so easy to get caught up in that negative emotion and that fear. And as I say, that's what we're here for, and that's where we can add value to you and to your lives as well.
Well, I'm so pleased our conversation today has been a lot more positive than I'd anticipated. You know, when we came up with the topic, you know, the interest rates and inflation, I went, oh my gosh, I mean, what can we tell people, our clients, that can make them, you know, feel a little bit more positive?
Yes.
But what I'm hearing is there's so many opportunities in it.
They are, Kim, and I think it's important to look at the little silver linings. You know, just basically our bonds offer a really good yield, and they always have, and with a rising interest rate in the country, that yield's only going to go up, and that's very attractive to foreign investors, and that's good for our rand. I mean, the rand has held up fantastically the last couple of weeks, so there are silver linings that I think we can also, you know, focus on and choose to focus on, and not get so bogged down with the negative news.
That's great. And I think also maybe just worth mentioning, if you do have children and they do have debt, this is a great time just to mention to them how important it is that they're not getting more and more debt, because that more and more debt will just make sure that they live on the hamster wheel.
Exactly.
And they never really get off of it.
Exactly. So some good advice would be, if they do have some excess cash, is to try and squash, especially the short-term debt, like a credit card, for example. With interest rates going up, that's going to get quite expensive over the next couple of months. So that's brilliant advice.
So Maryanne, in these interviews, I do like to just ask you one or two personal questions. You know, we're always asking our clients all the personal questions about their stories. You know, we believe that behind all the numbers, there's a whole lot of stories. And I think behind every retirement specialist at Chartered, there's also a whole lot of stories. And I know for you, you've just had a beautiful baby boy.
Yes.
And I just thought, you know, like maybe share with us, how's planning changed for you now that that's the reality of your world?
Dramatically.
For both of you.
So, I've always prided myself being an accountant in my last life, very much focused on the budget and the spending plan. Now even more so, obviously having a little one, it opens up your mind to different things that you never thought of before. So I think, you know, as soon as I found out I was expecting, I opened up an account for him. I'm saving diligently, but I found it very important to still save for myself.
Okay.
Because I want to maintain my independence, and I've also got to look forward, you know, when he's all grown up and left the house, for my retirement one day. So very much focused on saving, which is tough with rising cost of living and things like that, but we make a plan.
And Maryanne, on that, I thought it would be really nice for you to share with the listeners. So I remember a few years back when Maryanne came in for her interview at Chartered Wealth to join us. I mean, she was a chartered accountant and she was changing careers, and it was a passion to come into financial planning.
Definitely.
And I remember saying to you, Maryanne, just remember, you're probably not going to earn as much as you were earning. You're going to have to come down in the ranks because you're starting a career over. And I just wanted to know from you how that's gone.
Kim, best decision I ever made.
Oh, good. So pleased to hear this. So pleased.
I finally could merge my passion for numbers and markets and tax with helping people. And I think that's what gives me purpose every day, to come to Chartered. And everybody's situation and circumstance is different. So it's a challenge. I love change and I love a challenge, and it's working for me. So absolutely enjoying it. I don't actually see it as work. I just see it as guiding and helping others. And hopefully to make their lives a little bit better and a little bit easier. Well,
it's wonderful to hear that. It's wonderful to have you as part of the Chartered family.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for coming on the Chartered Show, and I do hope you're going to join me again. And thank you for giving us such interesting insights on both inflation and the interest rate. Thank you, Maryanne.
Thanks, Kim.
So Glen, welcome welcome to the second episode of the Chartered Show. Thank you for joining me.
Pleasure. Nice to be here.
So just for you listeners, Glen, as a reminder, is the Share Portfolio Manager at Chartered Wealth Solutions. And Glen, you joined us in August last year. Tell me, what made you join us?
I did, Kim, and I think what made me join was the journey that I've been on and the career path that I've had. I've worked in corporates on the advisory side, i.e. the stockbroking side, and I have worked for asset managers. And I think what Chartered offers is unique individual advice based on sort of human science as opposed to quantitative and numeric science. So it gets all of the aspects of financial planning, starting with advice, which I think is very important.
And I must say, many times at lunch with John and Kim, with the retirement specialists, we realized as a company that there was this missing piece to our offering, and that was having an in-house person that could look after our clients' share portfolios. So it's really great to have you on board at Chartered.
Thank you. Thanks, Kim.
So maybe just for our clients, just to share a little bit more about your journey, and I thought a good way to start would be, what is one of the defining moments of something that happened in your career that you could share with everybody?
I think if I was to choose one over the sort of 30 plus years, I would choose the GFC, which wasn't the global financial crisis of 2008 and 2009.
Hard time for everybody.
A very hard time for everybody, but perhaps we were slightly shielded in this country. But I was working in a joint venture with an international bank, and I think what it taught me was that really, household brands and household names were going to the wall in very, very short spaces of time. So kind of everything that we had gone through our career paths in this country, kind of worshipping, were laid very bare. And the financial services industry is about service to the clients at the end of the day. And I think it took an event like the GFC to actually really bring that home to me.
And I'm sure, Glen, just being a portfolio manager at those times, you had to really pull on so many skills that you'd learned to have the resilience to get through it all.
Yeah, I think that's true, and sometimes there are elements of a little bit of luck, but I think you're right, and I think what it does is it certainly in a concentrated period of time, it teaches you a lot about the next many years, and formulates your views on what to do when a major event occurs.
Because we all know, when markets are good, that's where we really show our value is when we're going through the more challenging times. So I must say, for us at Chartered, it's really great for us to have someone join our team that's got these years of experience. So we really are looking forward to the journey with you and working with you. But maybe just before we go into our topic today, I wanted you to just share a little bit about your family.
Oh, thank you. So I came to university in Joburg from Zimbabwe, and I went to Wits and did a BCom, and came back to Joburg when I was 27 and got the first full-time job that I ever had at that age, having swandered around London for a little bit.
Quite late to get your first
I played cricket, yeah. I played cricket in the Middlesex League, but I had a job at a London-based bank. Came back to Joburg, met my lovely wife Jenny, and we have 4 children, 3 of whom have left school. 1 is still at school, and that's kind of where we are.
Great. And if we look at that, you're also going to be going through quite a big life transition when all of the children have left home.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's kind of where we're at. Empty. There's a bit of empty nest syndrome as of sort of 8 weeks ago. So you're quite right.
But also a lot of wisdom that you can still impart, and even from a mentoring point of view of helping us, all the younger planners are chartered as well. So yeah, we really are excited to be sharing this journey with you. And just something about Glenn that he hasn't mentioned, but maybe that had something to do with the fact of when he got his first job, is your absolute love for sport. And I know it's cricket, and I've heard you very involved now in the Chartered Golf League too. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I love golf. I could improve a lot, but I love my time on a golf course, and I think it's a great leveler. It's a great character leveler, and you're in space and at peace with yourself, even if you get a bit annoyed every now and again with chips that you duff and drives that you hook left.
And I think there's also quite a lot of analogy between sport and actually doing your portfolio management work, because a lot of the same skills you need.
Quite right. I use sports analogies a lot when I'm talking to people socially, when I'm talking to clients, and I think it's a great telescope into life.
So let's go on to the topic that we brought in today, and that is really what's going on in the world right now, and the whole investment world, which I know it's quite a topic at the moment that we all wish we had a crystal ball for. We knew what was going to happen. I mean, we at Chartered have a theory, the times like this is when we don't want you doing anything emotional. We don't want you changing your investments, because at the moment what you need to be doing is sticking to your strategy, sticking to your plan, because we know when we're emotional we make our worst decisions. But really your role is completely different, because you've got this event happening and you need to be making decisions around the investments in order to to find opportunities. So maybe talk us through a little bit of your kind of mindset that you go through with this event, like what's going on in Ukraine, of how you're looking at the investment world with this event happening.
Yeah, okay. So I think that the first thing is, and it goes back to your point, that certainly the clients should be encouraged by the fact that their financial advisors and the portfolio managers are entrusted, with the custodianship of their hard-earned money, and they will do a considered job in terms of managing it. And that's really the kind of process and the thesis that I like to follow. So just because there's an event, you shouldn't be steamrolled into doing something due to the fact that there is an event.
Okay.
But what you should do is ascertain as much as you can in terms of the facts of that event, and see how the cards have changed. See how the hand that you've been dealt with has changed. And certainly, events generally create uncertainty, and the Ukraine war is not an exception. And I think that it creates opportunity. Uncertainty does give you pockets of opportunity, and there's news that might be negative but may have positive flow to it as the events unfold.
So maybe you could give me an example of kind of the opportunities that you're looking for in a time like this, because it's obviously, we're here in South Africa, that's all the way in Ukraine. How is it impacting our investments differently, or what kind of opportunities are you finding at the moment?
Okay, being as brief as I can, I'm going to give you two examples, and one is fossil fuels. So because of the impact of the supply of oil and natural gas in both the countries that are at war, Ukraine and Russia, there has been a tremendous spike in the oil price. And you would have thought that given the publicity around environmental, social and governance investing, ESG investing, that fossil fuels were probably on the way out. Now, I think this war could well have changed that for a little while. I don't think that they're here for the next 50 years by any stretch of the imagination, and renewable energy in its own right will be even more sought after, but fossil fuels will be here for a little bit longer than anticipated pre-February the 23rd. And therefore Sasol, a share like Sasol is probably a much more investable prospect than it was. And then the second thing is inflation, and again that goes back to the oil price. But a high oil price will mean higher inflation, both globally and in this country. And if inflation goes up, interest rates go up, and therefore the financial institutions, and in particular the banks, probably become better investment prospects than they were a couple of months ago. So so those are two examples. So what was on your radar in terms of the selection of shares and the construction of the portfolio has in fact changed a bit.
So just before I interviewed you, I interviewed Maryanne, retirement specialist at Chartered Wealth, and we were talking around the high inflation rate and interest rates, and she had a similar theory on it. So it's good to see that you're just confirming what each other are saying. Maybe just before we close our conversation, like this, what's happening in Ukraine, would you, and I know it's hard because it's giving an opinion, but would you say this is a black swan event as it is now, or do you think it possibly could be a black swan event for us? Yeah, I won't hold you to what happens.
No,
again, I know it's an opinion.
Now that's a great question. So, so each day when you go, when you're managing money and you go and sit at your desk, there are tail risks that you wouldn't see. So I would say that we've shifted towards the potential of some black swan events, and in its purest and worst form, the black swan of this event would be nuclear war. But I don't think that I think you've got to believe in sort of human nature and the fact that won't happen.
And it's not in the best interest for anybody, really.
No, you wouldn't have thought. No. But perhaps a more, and it wouldn't be black swan, but it would be tail risk. Is we go back to sort of pre-1989 Cold War days. So Russia is excluded, which I think will happen on a fairly long-term basis. And a country like China doesn't want to side with anyone, but is viewed in a less positive light by the Western world, and therefore investments in that country and how they're viewed may change as well. So, globalization, which happened after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, might be pegged back a few yards, is a potential outcome. But hopefully there's a peace accord and some kind of resolution can be found, and normal service is resumed at some point.
Thanks, Glenn. And I mean, just for all of us, all of these kind of events, we've had COVID, we've now got what we're going through in Ukraine. It never is a straight path that our investments and our lives go through. And I think the important part, and so much part of our philosophy here at Chartered, is when you are feeling uncertain, which most of us are feeling, but when it's getting to a stage where it's really causing you to stay awake at night and be anxious, that you come in and speak to your retirement specialist. But now, Glenn, with you joining us, it's a great value add where you can also join in the meeting. So for any clients who want to meet with Glenn, they just need to speak to their retirement specialist, and Glenn will also come into the meeting. So it's if you want to have more of these kind of conversations, but also if you possibly want to be looking at your share portfolio and you didn't know that this was one of the services that we do, as it is one of our new services. But Glenn, thank you very much for joining me today, and I do hope we will have many more topics. I do hope we'll find some ones that we could possibly say would be good news topics in the investment world. But again, thank you just for sharing your insights with us.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Kim.
This month in the In-Flight newsletter, I've written an article on decluttering. I thought I'd just give you a little bit of background to this article on decluttering. So the other day my husband came home and he announced to me that he was looking at changing his boardroom table in his office. Now that might sound like a simple thing that he was doing, but that boardroom table that he's got in his office is my late father's dining room table. My late father passed away 17 years ago, and as part of my inheritance, or really something that I took because it reminded me so much of him, was this dining room table. It's a stinkwood, old-fashioned ball and claw table. And my husband kindly has been looking after it for me for 17 years. So when he came home and he said he was changing it, I must tell you, it kind of went through me like I was losing my father all over again, because his table was no longer going to be used. And at first I responded, in a way that I shouldn't have responded, that how can you be getting rid of the table? And then when I reflected on it and I had to think about it, it was a table after all. It wasn't actually my father. And I think for many of us, this is something that we live with when we inherit things from our parents. And I think we do it the same when we start collecting in our own lives. Or we collect a whole lot of stuff that we like, and guess what? It doesn't mean that one day our children are going to want it. I collect crystals. My children have all told me, Mom, we don't love your crystals like you love your crystals, or the tea sets that you love. And we hang on to a whole lot of the stuff in our lives. And then what happens is it doesn't make space for new stuff. And this really came home to me with the story around this table, but more so through a client that I was having lunch with the other day. I was having lunch with our client, and she's written a beautiful article for this in-flight newsletter as well. Her name is Joan, and she is decluttering her home. And she was sharing with me about absolutely how wonderful it feels to be getting rid of stuff, to be making space for the new. She's making space for the new of moving into a new home, which is going to be a lot smaller. So she's getting rid of a whole lot of her stuff. And how she started doing the process was to build a vision board of what it is she wanted in a new home. And then she realized just how much of the stuff she'd accumulated that was no longer going to serve her in this next chapter of her life. And as she found homes for her new things, not necessarily just her children, because our children don't want all the stuff we've got, but there are people that can really benefit from things that we've got that we can no longer use. She was sharing it about her diving equipment. They'd collected diving and she didn't see herself diving again. So I encourage you all maybe just to look around at all the things you've got and think about it differently. What can you maybe give away? And you can get to new homes that really can benefit from it. And at the same time, what that does is it makes space for you to bring new things, not new things into your home, but new experiences, and just create a whole lot of new memories that can take you forward in this next chapter of your life. So I hope you found it interesting, and I hope you can find a way that other people can benefit from things that you don't need anymore. Enjoy the article, and thank you for joining us on The Chartered Show. I hope you enjoyed the second episode of The Chartered Show. Please feel free to like, comment, and share. And I look forward to hearing about some topics that you would like us to cover in the following month's shows. We look forward to hosting you next month. Thank you very much for joining us.